there is a dessert to the stream. I recently got some DLC for Dagon, this game here, made by some wonderful creators who do some Lovecraftian stories, sort of like visual novels. So we're going to play through one of those as part of our shorter streams and see how that goes.
And scary stories have been accompanying men for centuries. They have many faces and forms, but what is their purpose? Why do we enjoy being afraid so much? During our therapy, I'll try to explain.
Dr. Emerson's Nocturne demo available for their upcoming collection. Okay. Second, while I change our stream title over. I gotta do it at both spots because we still got our YouTube people going. Right. So we'll start a new game because I've never done this live on stream. And hey, we got some people in here. Dagon is a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
Okay. During the game, you encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the Elder Sign. Like that. Lovecraft's letters. As to letter, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly as easily and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolary expression is with me largely replacing conversation. As my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute, I cannot bear to talk much now, and am becoming as silent as the spectator himself. My loquacity extends itself on paper. Throughout his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which about 10% survive to this day. But his tendency to endless correspondence was a relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing. Linking anybody for a present was so much of an ordeal that I would rather have written a 250-line pastoral, or a 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn, from H.P. Lovecraft himself. Lovecraft would often skip meals to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence have been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Morphine entered into use in the 19th century was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War and World War I. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Frederick Serturner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Dagon was written a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entirely uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence, The Life and Times of H.P. Lovecraft by S.T. Joshi.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and most masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on July 27, 1900, before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just 1,000 years ago, the Huns, under their king Attila, made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Any secrets? Alright.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
Gotta love a good war story.
Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
I mean, if they're taking good care of you, would you have risked throwing yourself out to sea? Like, he literally just wrote, like, they were so bad at, like, prison keeping, I just walked out. Hey, Flip. Hey, Greg.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
Favorite war movie? Probably Saving Private Ryan.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Hi.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
He's recounting this story, so to him, this all really happened. This is why he's insane. Oh, the wet sucking sounds.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
That's breathing.
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
The mysterious volcanic islands. Volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating pumice, porous rocks created when superheated and pressurized rock is ejected from a volcano, can move across long distances and transport barnacles and macroalgae that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. Okay, so there's preface for this happening.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
Okay. So we're about to go hiking.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
He was traveling the ocean and suddenly woke up on all this.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided
Hello?
by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
What the hell? Brother! Brother, are you okay? Oh. You are not okay. So I guess to his mind, the land came up and it just carried with it everything that was there. Or anything that got in the way as the land was coming up.
That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
Yeah, that hill does not look much closer. Giant turtle. That would be preferable right now, I think.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance.
This is a freaking... that's a mountain.
An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill.
Also, that reflection on the lights there...
I know not why my dreams were so wild that night.
I think I have an idea.
But ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more.
There's one big pile of shit.
Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset.
What? Oh my god, he's losing it.
Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
I did not see a smiling face, but that would not surprise me. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn, Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive, his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background and a pile of papers scattered across the floor. too popular.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me.
Now he's fine with it.
But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
Suo, I'm not seeing that face, but maybe it was in that frame only. We could be going to Lulu together, though.
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few 100 feet, the declivity became very gradual.
Only a few 100-foot drop. You could take that.
Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze,
That's
I
very
scrambled
square.
with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself.
Yeah. Perfectly square piece of stone. What's ever happened wrong with that? Never seen 2001: A Space Odyssey?
But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
Also, all like the sea life is not here around this thing.
For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Examining surroundings. Oh.
Now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope.
I'm loving the artwork on this. Looks like we got some fish people and something above the water.
Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
You don't need to throw crude in there.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books. consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world.
That just looks like a lionfish on the right. Octopus, Cthulhu, a squid, and a jellyfish.
Whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
That one? Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later work, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and character notes, the Shadow Out of Time, the Haunter of the Dark, islands emerging from the ocean, the Call of Cthulhu, more fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo, and the Whisper in the Darkness. Also consider the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also include a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip in details in order not to spoil the ending. Okay.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint.
Uh-oh.
Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seemed to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe.
Yeah, they made it up.
Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Last, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't until he saw the, 40-foot tall creature standing in front of the monolith that he was like, I think I went crazy.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
Yes, Grey Grace.
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital.
Oh. We win then. Took seeing some kind of John to go, well, okay, I am crazy. I'm a human.
Brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean.
And I don't mean that like sarcastically or anything like that. Like, Fliv is human. The tentacles are not mine. Or at least not of my person.
In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing.
Ah, they just found him.
Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
I am on a picnic table. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of an amateur journalist. In 1915, he started publishing his own journey called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction, again for the first time since his teenage years. Dagon, published in 1919, as one of the short stories were written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armament, and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is, or ever can be, above warfare, until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist.
I don't know what you mean by lamp theory, Greg Grayson. If you want to type out the explanation, I'd love to learn.
And amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem, an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that reside in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
Hopelessly conventional. The guy wasn't strange enough to listen to the full story. Lovecraft attempts to find a job in 1925 for influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine where he could write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and crafted with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship, which energetic enterprise can command. made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark on the individual pieces prevent any substitution by careless contractors. August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of the most questionable decisions involves introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's views of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. Anything else for me to peek at secrets? Oh, there it is. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted, in defense of Dagon, that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, is the only proper choice among other things. It was gender specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated February 13, 1928. As for a matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor, and never intend to. Having a strong aesthetic, disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate nature equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition, the prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as of any other.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm. A mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed. worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Now he's even barricaded himself in.
It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
And that's Dagon. All right. On that note, we are going to call that for stream today. Today is more of a shorter one. Oh, I even missed 4 of the secret information pieces that they have. But let's find somebody for all you lovely people to go see. Who's on right now? Foxes is, but she's probably ending soon. You know, shake the chat. We'll go raid our other sibling, Nikto. He's about to hit 4K on Twitch, so please go and give your support. But in the meantime, I will see all of you people later. We are back at it in Dagon. We are going to play the Railway Horror DLC. So again, this is a Lovecraft book that has been turned into sort of a visual novel. So I hope you enjoyed those sort of stories, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And if you see in the chat there, they're currently trying to schedule out me if I turn into a doll who gets hoop me on what days. This is not an official Lovecraft story, even though it may sound familiar to some of you. It's an excerpt from the writer's letters to his friend, Donald Wandre, from November 24, 1927, in which he describes one of his dreams, or rather, a nightmare. Profits from all DLCs are donated to humanitarian aid organization. Click more for information. Thank you for your support.
My dreams occasionally approached the fantastical in character, though falling somewhat short of coherence. One scene is especially stamped upon my recollection. That of a dank, fetid, reed-choked marsh under a gray autumn sky.
Alright, so in this, you gotta find secrets within the world. At least we are being very adult about this instead of fighting over you. That is true. You're also very nice to each other. You're asking about his tentacles. Okay, that's the way to go. Harry squat eldritch tentacles with questionable intent.
With a rugged cliff of lichen-crusted stone rising to the north.
What is there? That's a Grim Reaper site. The recipient of the letter containing the story presented here had a significant impact on the career of the writer from Providence. One of Lovecraft's most famous stories, The Call of Cthulhu, was initially rejected by the publisher of Weird Tales magazines. Wandre visited his office and made a small provocation during the conversation, suggesting that Lovecraft was looking for other magazines to expand his audience. After this visit, the nervous publisher decided to accept the story and then publish it in 1928. Just like Lovecraft, Wandre was interested in poetry. Among others, he created the Sonnets of the Midnight Hours, a series which inspired the creator Dagon to write the famous sonnets Fungi from Yugoth. But his greatest merit was co-founding the Arkham House, publishing house with August Derleth, which published Lovecraft's works after the writer's death, contributing greatly to his current popularity. I gotta go check up on Kraken. Okay. Have a good night, Gray. I appreciate you stopping by.
I ascended a rift, or cleft, in this beetling precipice.
There's like car parts. Like stuff is just like scattered about the place. Siri, why are you yelling? Who said you could yell?
Noting as I did so the black mouths of many fearsome burrows extending from both walls into the depths of the stony plateau.
Protagonist whose fate you follow is Lovecraft himself. After all, it is an account of his dream. That's why we wanted to reproduce his way of speaking and accent as faithfully as possible. Unfortunately, no recordings of his voice have survived. That's why we had to rely on only descriptions from numerous letters. Friends remember his voice as high-pitched, thin, and flat. However, it changed while reading or reciting. As the writer's wife Sonia Green recalls, his voice then became stronger, clearer, and deeply resonant. Lovecraft spoke with a New England accent, which, as the writer himself mentioned, was characterized by the follow. We don't sound any final R in words like car, far, and so on. Phonetically, our common pronunciation is indistinguishable from the OAA, FAA, and selected letters 3.420. In his youth, Lovecraft tested his singing skills and even recorded some of his rehearsal. My mother actually liked the results. Others are not always unbiased critics, but I saw to it that an accident soon removed the incriminating evidence. Later, I tried something less ambitious. This was a better success, but reminded me so much of the way of a dying fox terrier that I very carelessly happened to drop it, the record, soon after it was made. I have since confined my artistic talents to literature. H.P. Lovecraft to Morris W. Moe, 15th of May, 1918. Just like me, for real, could not sing. Hey, Buns!
At several points, the passage was roofed over by the choking of the upper parts of the narrow fissure. These places being exceedingly dark and forbidding the perception of such burrows as may have existed there.
I got turned into a creepy doll.
In one such dark space, I felt conscious of a singular accession of fright, as if some subtle and bodiless emanation from the abyss were engulfing my spirit.
Yeah, I'll have to play again.
The blackness was too great for me to perceive the source of my alarm.
So one day I'll have to go and get ending B for that game. Which doesn't bother me too much, because it was 2 hours and it was a lot of fun.
At length, I emerged upon a tableland of moss-grown rock and scanty soil, lit up by a faint moonlight which had replaced the expiring orb of day. Casting my eyes about, I beheld no living object, but was sensible of a very peculiar stirring far below me amongst the whispering rushes of the pestilential swamp I had lately quitted.
Dreams have often been an inspiration for Lovecraft. Dagon is a good example. Moreover, the writer often set the action of his stories in the dream land, a separate world filled with unique places, creatures, and legend. This informal dream cycle included stories written between 1918 and 1932, such as The Cats of Ulthar, The Doom That Came to Sarnath, Polaris, and The Silver Key. They show a slightly different side of the author of Call of Cthulhu, and inspirations with work of Lord Dunsany. The protagonist associated with the Dreamland is Randolph Carter, known for, among others, one of Lovecraft's longest stories, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, tells the story of Carter's journey through amazing lands in search of a wonderful city that appeared back to him in his dream. That's not supposed to be there.
After walking for some distance, I encountered the rusty tracks of a street railway and the worm-eaten poles which still held the limp and sagging trolley wire.
All right. Lovecraft believed that authors could make their stories more credible by exchanging ideas and drawing from each other's works. The best example is the famous invented book Necronomicon, which also appeared in the works of his friends, such as Robert Bloch, later creator of Psycho, and Robert E. Howard, creator of Conan the Barbarian. Its presence in the works of various other writers has even led to the mythologization of the Necronomicon and the appearance of references to the book in countless novels, films, and other works of pop culture. Lovecraft himself all used elements of other people's works, such as the books Unausprechlichen Kulten, Nameless Cults, by Robert E. Howard, and Der Vermis Mysteries, Mysteries of the Worm, by Robert Bloch. Hastur, a creature borrowed from Robert W. Chambers, author of The King in Yellow, who was inspired by Ambrose Bierce, also used as Land of Carcosa, which later appeared in the TV series True Detective. Sathalgua, a creature invented by Clark A. Smith, Lovecraft slightly changed its appearance and included it in his stories. He wanted to follow the tradition, so we included objects from 3 other games created by our friends. I wonder if you'll be able to recognize them. The mask.
Following this line, I soon came upon a yellow vestibuled car numbered 1852 of a plain, double-trucked type common from 1900 to 1910. It was untenanted, but evidently ready to start.
Nah. The railway has always fascinated people. The mighty power of machines, the freedom to travel vast distances, the romanticism of almost unrestricted exploration. Thousands of strangers passing each other every day, but also the desolate train station, dreamlike journeys through the night, fatal accidents, and dangerous strangers. No wonder that this topic attracted horror and fantasy writer from Charles Dickens, The Signal Man, through Robert Blochardt's award-winning That Hellbound Train, to Clive Barker's The Midnight Meat Train. It's also impossible not to mention the most important Polish weird fiction writer, Stefan Gravinsky, whose most famous collection of stories, The Motion Demon, is dedicated to the railway. You'll be able to get acquainted with his work through our next game. And by the way, the steam locomotive was first used to transport passengers in 1825. I wonder if it has anything to do with the numbers dreamed by Lovecraft.
The trolley being on the wire and the air brake pump now and then throbbing beneath the floor. I boarded it and looked vainly about for the light switch.
I wouldn't want to get on that.
Noting as I did so the absence of controller handle, which implied the brief absence of the motorman. Then I sat down in one of the cross seats toward the middle, awaiting the arrival of the crew and starting of the vehicle.
In 1927, Donald Wandre hitchhiked from Minnesota to Rhode Island to visit Lovecraft, sometimes having to spend the night outdoors during the trip. Over the course of more than 2 weeks, Lovecraft showed the guests around the most interesting places in his hometown of Providence and the surrounding area. They also went, among others, to Boston, where the writer wanted to show his friend the house which partly inspired the story Pickman's Model. Unfortunately, it turned out that it had been demolished. However, the truly chilling, literally, event occurred later when another of Lovecraft's friends, James F. Morton, arrived. The three of them went to a store in Warren, where they took part in an ice cream eating contest. Each of them tried as many as 28 types, and Lovecraft admitted that he ate about 2.5 liters of this delicacy. A statement describing their feat was framed and hung on the wall of the store.
Presently, I heard a swishing in the sparse grass toward the left and saw the dark forms of 2 men looming up in the moonlight. They had the regulation caps of a railway company, and I could not doubt but that they were the conductor and motorman. Then one of them sniffed with singular sharpness and raised his face to howl at the moon. The other dropped on all fours to run toward the car. I leapt up and at once raced madly out of that car. And away across endless leagues of plateau till exhaustion waked me. Doing this not because the conductor had dropped on all fours, but because the face of the motorman was a mere white cone, tapering to one blood-red tentacle.
And with the tentacle covering his face is a strong and disturbing motif. You may recognize this image as this is how Nyarlathotep, a mysterious powerful creature appearing in Lovecraft stories, was portrayed in the role-playing game called Cthulhu. A creature with a bloody tentacle howling at the moon became the most frequently depicted form of Nyarlathotep, although this is not how Lovecraft describes it. The presented story also became the inspiration for the erotic macabre novel Trolley No. 1852 by Edward Lee. Its hero is Lovecraft himself. He accepts a commission to write a specific type of story, combining horror and sensual themes, which features the titular trolley and his terrifying motorman. And that is the story. And with that, we are going to wrap up our stream. Oh, we dropped frames at some point today. That's super annoying. Oh, I only missed one in the very beginning. I'll take it. Alright. So today we have wrapped up Dalmare. Tomorrow night we are going to be playing through House of Ashes. This is the third installment of the Dark Analog anthology. So for those of you who caught Little Hope, it's going to be very similar, or even Man of Medan that we played on Sunday as a special game. After that, on Saturday, to wrap up Streamiversary and the very needed break that I will be taking for Sunday, we will be playing Amnesia the Bunker. But until then, let's find a nice streamer to send all of you guys to. Nico's still going. I'm going to send all of you to Nico.